In July 2018, a video went viral showing Cameroonian soldiers murdering 2 women and their children. The Cameroonian government denied the execution, but a group of open-source investigators confirmed its authenticity. Today in the studio with me is Youri van der Weide, one of the investigators who took part in this case. Welcome on Studex.
Thank you.
What exactly can we see in that video?
So in the video, we see soldiers of the Cameroonian army, like about 4 or 5 soldiers that carry 2 women and their children somewhere in the far north region of Cameroon, and a bunch of local people, probably who are part of the vigilante group that's formed out of civilians in that area. So we don't know exactly what happened before. We do have some ideas what could have preceded this video. So we think that somehow either this vigilante group or the soldiers captured these women and their 2 children and suspected them of being part of the terrorist group Boko Haram, which especially in that time, but also still now, is very active in Nigeria, and we're also doing some incursions into the far north region of Cameroon. So that's a little bit of the background. So the video starts when we see these soldiers, as I said, carrying the women to the place where they are going to be killed. Yeah? So likely they walked out all the way from an outpost in Zelewet, where they were stationed, to this place in a little town called Kravamafa, which is about 1 kilometer from where they were stationed. Yeah? So from that time, like we see the video beginning when they're already in this town Kravamafa. Yeah? Someone is making the video. He calls the names of the soldiers. One he calls Chocho, the other deuxième classe Cobra, and you can see they are like some of them have camouflage on, some of them are carrying weapons like rifles that are used also by the Cameroonian army, such as the Zastava M21, which is a gun of Serbian make. And at the end of the video, once they reach the location where this killing took place, they shoot both the children. They blindfold them and their children as well, and shoot them death. Also the children as well.
Mm-hmm. What was going through your head when you first saw it?
Yeah, good question. Like, I think every time I watch the video, if you watch the beginning, which is them carrying the women to the place, calling them, okay, BH, Boko Haram, and telling them they are going to die, you don't really realize it yet. And then once you watch it, maybe the first time it doesn't get to you. But the more you watch it, yeah, the more it starts to affect you actually. And I didn't expect it, but at one point even like had some problems sleeping, even though it's not the most gruesome video I've seen like in my life or while doing this type of work. So it kind of surprised me, and after that I also decided to be careful also watching these videos, because it can really affect someone.
Mm-hmm. When the video got viral on the internet, the Cameroonian Minister of Communication, Issa Chiroma Bakari, stated, and I quote, "The video that is currently going round is nothing but an unfortunate attempt to distort actual facts and intoxicate the public. Its sincerity can be easily questioned." End of the quote. And some also claim that it took actually place in Mali. Mm-hmm. So what led you to believe it's from Cameroon and not Mali?
Yeah, so everything from the context already told us and people working in that region for many years. Yeah? So we had not only people from the BBC working on this, There was a bunch of people like me, open source analysts, but also people from, for example, Amnesty International, and a freelance journalist that's mainly based in Africa and traveled to Cameroon several times. So these people, they have sources on the ground, they know the country. So that's one thing, yeah. The other thing is that purely from what we see in the video, right, we can already come to the conclusion this is likely not Mali, but Cameroon. So the biggest extent of Boko Haram, for example, because in the video the soldiers actually say the acronyms BH, which is BH in French, means Boko Haram. They accuse the women of being part of Boko Haram. Boko Haram, as you know, is a Nigerian group, and they were also active in Cameroon, a little bit in Chad, and in Niger as well. But based on that, we could tell, okay, Mali, that's unlikely. Yeah. The other things like the camouflage they wear, because Isa Bakari, he says that they are not properly clothed. They are not fully dressed up in their uniforms, and some of the camouflage they wear is actually for the forest type, for the forest, and not for the Sahel region, where they usually use a more like a desert-style camouflage. But from social media pictures that Cameroonian soldiers tagged in that same area, we see a lot of people wearing that type of forest-style camouflage. We see a lot of people who are actively patrolling, also wearing like incomplete uniforms. And also from what people, sources of these people from Amnesty International, from this freelance journalist, said is that also from their experience, they have seen a bunch of these people walking around with like this type of camouflage, incomplete uniforms. And the other thing is also the Zastava M21, which isn't a very common rifle for that for sub-Saharan Africa. But it's quite common in Cameroon actually. The Bataillon d'Intervention Rapide that's the elite squad of the Cameroonian army, has a lot of these guns, has a lot of these Zastavas. So it's very common gun in Cameroon. And also the rankings of the officers also correspond with the rankings there in Cameroon. And later on, but that's maybe something we'll talk more about later, the government even got it back and admitted that some of these guys were indeed like there, stationed in that area. Some of the names were leaked, and we looked up the names on social media. We found their profiles, and we were able to tell that these are the men really that we see also in the video.
As you said previously, the video is filmed by one of the soldiers, or presumably someone who was there, and it's now being used as evidence against them. So why do you think they filmed it in the first place?
So I doubt they thought of that this could be used as evidence against them. Yeah? So again, this is like me making an assumption, but probably, and we hear this from other people as well, this video was circulating in some WhatsApp groups or closed groups on social media. And later on, because this video was leaked a couple of years after it actually happened, it's like we calculated that this must have happened in 2015, it was leaked in 2018. So already after the Anglophone war started in the Anglophone areas of Cameroon, so one theory is that maybe an Anglophone soldier that got angry, upset with what's happening in his like hometown, home area, leaked this video, or someone who had like a bit of conscience decided to leak this, and then yeah, it went from there to to this.
In this case, you used the shade that the soldiers were projecting onto the ground to tell the date and the time. Are there any other ways to tell time in audio, video material like this?
Yeah, so of course, if you have the original, which wasn't the case, then sometimes you can tell through metadata. Although metadata is a bit tricky, I wouldn't rely only on metadata of the video, because metadata can also be altered by people who know a little bit of IT and how to manipulate these things. So the other thing is, which we also used for this investigation, was to look at satellite imagery and see what changed over time, because we see some structures, some buildings that disappear, for example, in 2016, or that weren't built yet in 2014, etc. And the other thing, of course, is also the vegetation, to tell like what time of the year it is. Is this the dry season or the rain season?
Your team also relied on local people who helped you verify the content. How did you get in touch with them?
So yeah, the local people, it was mostly done over these open source, I'd say using open source information. But we did get some tips from locals, and that was mostly through the people that were working with us, who had sources, who had been there already in that area. So there was Miss Ilaria Allegrozzi, who used to work for Amnesty International back then. She has quite an extensive knowledge of Cameroon, and also had some sources in Cameroon itself, in that area. And also another journalist, Emmanuel Freudenthal, worked quite a bit in Cameroon, and also knew some people from Cameroon that could give us some tips.
This case was in many ways quite extraordinary. It resonated through social media all over the world. Do you think this form of online, independent, open source investigation might be maybe the future of investigative journalism?
Definitely you will see it more, yeah, but it's not going to completely replace investigative journalism, because you're still like reliant on a lot of anonymous sources or human sources in a lot of situations, yeah. If you're investigating fraud at a company, the chances are higher that you will find something by speaking to someone than by finding something like online. Sometimes you will still find these things, but in these cases, like something happened at a company, I don't know, something within the intelligence where there are no pictures taken, no information leaked. So I don't think you can be solely reliant on just open source or just closed source. I think the best combination is to combine the two.
And we are now seeing an increase in highly altered audiovisual content, such as deepfake videos. Do you think you'll be able to keep up with these developments?
Yeah, so there are people who work on this and who like research these things, right? Right now, I think these deepfakes, they are not yet that ubiquitous. I think you can still tell from a lot from metadata. A lot of it is also really by looking at the video, things like eyes of the politicians, etc., or of the person, not blinking at all. Often these deepfakes, they are reliant on videos that were already published before. Yeah? So if you see a deepfake, for example, of Trump, where he says something, I don't know, something potentially dangerous or crazy, it's very likely that that video will be based on an older video. So just by pausing the video, making like a screenshot and doing a reverse image search might bring you to the original video. But yeah, it's something that's challenging, and there is like not an easy way to detect those videos, at least not that I'm aware of.
Mm. Independent open source investigators are usually not backed by any major organization, like media organization, which I think makes them maybe a bit exposed to potential dangers. Is there any way to protect these people, and maybe do you feel the need to be protected in the first place?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. Like protected from, like for example, the government or.
Yeah, well, depending on what you're investigating.
Like, if we uncover something, I don't know, for example, against the Cameroonian government or some other government, that they might get back to you. Yes, sometimes there are certainly people who prefer to stay anonymous, and I know a lot in the open source community that are completely anonymous. So yeah, there is certainly this concern. I know also people who don't travel to some countries either because they are not allowed to travel there anymore, or because they are a bit concerned as well. So that can happen, but so far I haven't really encountered that problem yet. It might happen in the future. I hope not, but it's possible, yeah.
And open source investigations also bring a sense of science into journalism. Could this be the way to return people's trust in the media in some way?
Yeah, I guess the thing is that there are several people, yeah. For example, there is a Chinese guy, Sean Zheng, who did a lot of geolocation of the Chinese re-education camps for the Uyghurs in China. And I heard, I didn't speak to him directly, but I heard from someone that like he himself wasn't really sure about these re-education camps or concentration camps existing or not until he started to investigate it himself. Yeah? First he didn't believe it, but by now he has found a whole list of such camps and has pretty much proven, not only to himself but also to other people, that such camps exist. I think this applies to a lot of people. For example, before I started with this, back in 2014-15, there was like the invasion of Russia in the Donbass. I heard a lot of information spread by the Russian government or media organizations sponsored by Russia. Also a lot of information from the West or from the Ukrainian side. And honestly, I wasn't entirely sure of who's right until looking into it. So for example, Bellingcat was a very good platform for this, because they showed not only did they say to us that, okay, the Russians, and not only Russian people, but the regular Russian army is in those areas, they also showed how they got to their conclusions. So I think showing how you got to your conclusions and on what you based it is a very big part of like winning over people and gaining their trust.
Is there any case you're working on right now, an investigation?
Yeah, so there are a few, well, there is one case I'm working on right now, also about Cameroon, about a rapid intervention battalion, and who trains them, who equips them. I cannot say a lot about it as of yet, because it's an ongoing investigation. Something I just concluded was investigation into weapon exports from, for example, from Spain to other countries. So we try to track through open source information where these like weapons are being shipped to whom, how much do they get from the countries, sorry, and where are these weapons being used right now.
Okay, thank you for your time and good luck with your investigation.
Thank you.